You know, it's difficult covering bands on this series sometimes. Not because said bands are bad in any capacity, and not because I don't like writing the series, it's very clear that I do. But I bet that there's not a damn soul in my humongous YouTube audience of 37 subscribers who can name me any Faith No More song besides Epic. Luckily, that is part of the reason why I do this series. First forming in 1979 in San Francisco, California, Faith No More has seen many lineup changes, stylistic changes, and record label changes. They even broke up in 1998 and reformed in 2009, and also, I would be very remiss to not mention this, but rest in peace to Chuck Mosley, who was the band's vocalist before Mike Patton took the position. With that surprisingly somber moment out of the way, this is Backtracking, its first two-part episode of Season 3, and this time, it's Faith No More. We start with the band's debut album titled We Care A Lot. Yeah, we're still on the trend of the band's debuts not being self-titled. Anyway, this album was released in 1985 through Modern Records, and was produced by the band themselves as well as the dude named Matt Wallace. I wonder if that's a relationship that will go on for a very, very long time. This album would be the first of two with Chuck Mosley as lead vocalist, and it's also the band's shortest at 34 minutes and 51 seconds. Now, remember what I said in my intro about the band having lineup changes and my mentioning of the band's best-known song? Well, it's kind of good that I mentioned that, because critics liked this album a lot, as did I. But the critics were big fans of Mosley's vocal style, but I kind of liked it, to be honest. To me, it just sounds like how Faith No More would sound, but with Chuck Mosley singing instead. While it's not quite as pronounced as the band's later works, their signature eccentricities are still dotted throughout the album very carefully. And I like that choice, not really showing all that they have to offer just yet and leaving something to be desired while still showing enough to keep people interested. Going back briefly to the critics hating on Chuck singing, I can sort of see what their problems with it are. Pardon me. At times it is a bit drowning and even a little bit strange, but since I had never listened to a Faith No More album in my life in full before having to for the sake of this episode, I wasn't really that bothered by it. And also I got extremely fucking lucky when it came to finding this album. There is a 2016 reissue with new tracks, most of which technically aren't new tracks because they're remixes of songs on the album, but I didn't find that version. I found the 1985 original, which I'm very happy to have done. Another complaint that critics had was that the production was a bit rough, but I like how the band handled that as well. Despite the album being released over 30 years ago now, and also despite the fact that I heard the original version of the album, the production style still sounds pretty good, especially for its time. I guess the part of that might go to the band helping to handle it, and also the record label helped too, since it is based in the band's hometown of San Fran. Having a record label that close to home can prove very beneficial, it seems, and the band members also do a good job too, so let's get to that. Chuck's vocals, despite being a bit odd at times, are still pretty good and he does showcase a decent range. William Gold's bass is a huge driving force and it sounds nice and deep. Jim Martin's guitar work is great, even though there's no solos, but hey, he still chugs out a good riff. Mike Borden's drumming, Borden's drumming is pretty on point as well, carrying a steady groove to things. Rodney Bottom, yes, that is his surname, but with a U instead of an O for bottom. Keyboard work is also really good, playing great melodies and adding just a nice little sprinkle and a touch to things. Standout songs include the intro title track, Arabian Disco, Pills for Breakfast, The Jungle, and my favourite in Why Do You Bother? We Care A Lot may have been trashed in some places by critics, but I found myself really enjoying it. It's an odd duck, sure, but it's fun, and it doesn't lose that sense of just letting you have a good time and enjoying yourself. I can recommend this one even if the critics aren't. Next up is the band's second album, Introduce Yourself, released in 1987 through Slash Records and produced by the band themselves with Matt Wallace again alongside a dude named Steve Berlin. Introduce Yourself is often considered by many to be the band's true debut album, even though it's their second album, so that sentence makes no sense really. I like the album's title, to be frank, but I feel like it would have been better reserved for an actual debut. Part of the reason that this is considered their debut is because We Care A Lot had a very limited release period. Due to the album being released on a more homegrown label, it was both a blessing and a curse, but more so the former because I did actually quite like that album. Having said that, things are a lot better for Introduce Yourself. Whilst the band were touring, they met fellow funk rockers Red Hot Chili Peppers, and Flea himself invited the band to tour with them. Said touring had not only proved beneficial to the band from that aspect, but also probably helped them to find a new record label. Slash would be the band's home for a good long while, but we'll talk more about that in part 2. Anyway, whilst I disagreed with the critics' putting down of We Care A Lot, I do agree with them on positive things they have to say about Introduce Yourself. Better production value, better lyrics, and one thing that I quite liked in this album too was more storytelling, and there's even some skits at the start of a couple of songs. Hell, there's even a redone version of the song We Care A Lot that sounds better on this album than it did on the album that it's titled after. Some critics did still criticize Chuck Mosley's vocals, but once again, I don't see that much of a problem with them. This would be his last album with the band, sure, but he still did a good job. I'd say they performed better here than he did on We Care A Lot, and I quite feel like he was underrated even then too. I guess this goes back to what I was saying about We Care A Lot, in that I'm glad that I went into this episode completely blind with the exception of having heard one or two songs by the band beforehand. Still, the album isn't terribly long, so even if you do wind up disliking Mosley's performance, you don't really have to put up with it all that much. He still performs well and even showcases some good comedy chops with the band skits. Jim's guitar is still great, with better riffs and even a couple of solos, which is a good sign. Roddy's keyboard work is still good, although not as pronounced as I'd like it to be, but still shiny, you know? Billy's bass just sounds awesome all around, great trips and riffs, and Roddy's drumming is also awesome. Hang on, I said Roddy, I meant to say Mike Borden there, crap. Script error! And Roddy's and Mike Borden's drumming is also awesome, with great timing in each hit on the snare feeling like it matters, which is important in a funk rock style band. Sorry for the snafu there. Standard songs include the title track, Death March, Blood, R&R, and my favourite the Crab song. Yeah. Still keeping their eccentricities and element of fun while adding experimentation and some darker, more political lyrical themes. Introduce Yourself as another solid effort from the band, and it's worth seeking out, and I can recommend it. It's worth your time if you can find it. We then reached the band's third album, The Real Thing. Released in 1989, the band once again stuck to Slash Records and once again produced it themselves with Matt Wallace on hand to help. The Real Thing is one of the band's longer albums at just under 55 minutes, and it's also their first effort with new and better known vocalist Mike Patton. And to be fair, whilst I wasn't a big fan of the critics' bashing of Chuck Mosley, I do much prefer Mike Patton's vocal style. It's more eclectic and versatile, and it lends itself to a huge experimentation aspect for this album, but more on that later because I want to speak more about something different. So, remember when I said about the band meeting with the Chili Peppers and that, helping out with their previous album? Pardon me. Well, when Faith No More released their song Epic from this album, it gained some controversy from the bed-cut Philly papers themselves, as they saw the song and video being very similar to their own stuff. Now, I've got to admit, I've listened to some Chili's in my time. I've listened to stuff that was around at the same time as Epic came out. I've seen videos for those songs. I've seen the video for Epic multiple times. I have to admit, I don't really see a whole lot of similarities. The only thing that I can think of that they share is similar genres, and that's it. It's kind of dumb to say even that because, you know, it would be dumb in the same way to say that Less Than Jake were going to accuse Streetlight Manifesto of ripping them off, which they haven't because despite both those bands being a ska punk / punk rock mix, they sound nothing alike. Anyway, both RHCP and FNM did resolve their issues, so that's a good sign. Back to the album itself. So, yeah, there's more experimentation because of Mike Patton, mostly because he's also known for fronting a band called Mr. Bungle, who themselves incorporate a wide range of styles and sounds into their music, and they're just really weird. And that is really no different in The Real Thing. The experimentation, not so much the weirdness, although that's there. It still keeps its funk rock / funk metal roots, but adds some thrash, punk, hip-hop, synth, prog rock, and the closing track is so damn close to jazz that it's not even funny. The most bizarre thing about it is that it actually all works. There's even a really damn good cover of War Pigs by Black Sabbath. The band does take themselves more seriously, but they still have that sense of humour that keeps a smile on your face even as you tap your toes to the smooth grooves of the album. Mike Patton's vocals are just fantastic, clean singing with nice inflections plus some surprisingly good rapping and screaming make for a great mix. Jim's guitar work still rocked with awesome solos and licks and good riffs, good riffs. Bill's bass gets to stand out more, which is a good thing, showing a deep slap and groove to things. Mike Borden, I got it right that time, his drumming has improved quite a lot as well, sounding brilliant on the snare, showcasing some really good control too. And Roddy's keyboard work just sounds great with awesome piano riffs and a lovely tone to things, as always. Standout songs include Epic, Surprise, You're Dead, the War Pigs cover, I really do like that, the title track, and my favourite in the song, Zombie Eaters. The Real Thing is considered a classic album for many reasons, and I agree with all of them. Top-notch production value, effortlessly switching styles and genres, and lyrics that'll just make you feel all happy inside, even as weird as they'll sound. I can totally recommend this one, it's super duper good. Next is the band's fourth album, titled Angel Dust, released in 1992, the year I was born in, yay, through the band's home of Slash Records and produced once again by the band themselves and Matt Wallace. There's a lot of interesting stuff about this one. First is that it's the band's longest album at 58 minutes and 48 seconds, and it's also the band's last album with Jim Martin. Also, lead singer Mike Patton had a lot more say in how things went with the album, but it's clear to hear from the album sound that he wasn't a total control freak, which is nice. But before I let them more praise into this album, and trust me, there's plenty to like about it, I do want to talk about the recording process. As we all know, it's not uncommon for bands to have different song titles before an album is released. In fact, the band recorded about 19 songs in total, and only 15 made the final cut, and I could only listen to 14 of those even though I found the right version of the album. But since the missing 15 track is a re-recorded version of As the Worm Turns from the Chuck Mosley days, I'm really not missing a lot much as I quite enjoyed that song. Anyway, the only song that the band recorded that kept its name was the song Malpractice. Let's go over the rest because I'm going to put this out like it's a JRPG. Caffeine was called Triplet, Midlife Crisis was called Madonna, RV went by Macaroni and Cheese and then Country and Western Song, Smaller and Smaller was called Arabic and later the Arabian Song, Kindergarten was called F Sharp, Be Aggressive was called I Swallow, as Small Victory was called Japanese, Crack Hitler was called Action Adventure, The World Is Yours was called The Sample Song, Everything's Ruined was called The Carpenter Song, Land of Sunshine was called The Funk Song, and an unreleased recording called The Shuffle Song / Seagull Song also as well. Now that's that out of the way. Back to the lathering of praise. This album is a little bit less experimental than the real thing, but it makes up for its life by adding a surprisingly darker element to things that actually works. I've talked in previous episodes about how it can make or break a band, and in this case it certainly worked for Faith No More. Things are a lot heavier and feel a bit more like a traditional metal album, almost losing all elements of funk while still keeping a steady groove to things and making the important instruments in the funk band stand out. It's a strange contradiction that works so damn well, but I'll chalk that up to the band production as well as Mike Patton having a bigger say in things. Speaking of which, Patton's vocals sound so damn good, he even has a nice scream on some of the songs with even some good high notes too. Despite Jim's lack of guitar solos, it does play some good riffs and has awesome timing, despite this being his last album with the band. Billy's bass has some great shine to it as well, with some good slapping riffs and really nice plicky scales. Borden's drumming is still great, even sounding heavier to go along with the harsher tone of the album. And Roddy's keyboard is probably better than it's ever been. Pardon me, I'm burping a lot, I am drinking Pepsi Max, not sponsored. Playing beautiful sweeps and riffs of his own. Standout songs include RV, Be Aggressive, Malpractice, Jizz Lobber, yes, that is the name. Oh, another burp, pardon me, that is the name of those songs. And my favourite is Smaller and Smaller. Angel Dust is the band showing a darker side to them that works way better than it has any right to, and thanks to a heavier nature and better production, it works, and I can recommend it, it's pretty good. And that will about do it for part 1. Join me next time, I don't know if it'll be tomorrow, but next time for part 2, where I'll cover the band's last 3 albums. Thank you for listening, you're awesome, bye bye.